Now this is how I'm doing it. This is what I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but this corner here can now sit right on that line with the notch sitting flat on the table. Welcome back to the Workbench, where we try to make things. And what we're continuing to try to make today is Revell's Ford FD-100. It was from Foose Designs. We're going to be doing things a little bit different. And what we're working on right now is the chassis. And to get you caught up real quick, we're wanting to take this chassis and turn it into an air ride chassis, or just put it on airbags. So last episode, we kind of built I guess we could call a frame stand here, or whatever you want to call this, something to just hold the frame square. And then I've done some work in between last time and today, and I remembered to take pictures. So not only did I take pictures, but I made a little list of what each picture is so I can know what to tell you I was doing. So basically what we need to do, though, is create, let me bring this over so you can see it, is create the notches for an axle to sit up in the back. So because we're going to have this sitting down with the airbags collapsed, and we want to have somewhere for that axle to go, a notch for that axle to sit in, so it'll sit nice and low, as low as we can get it, at least. Give ourselves some room. So we started by creating a frame stand. We put some clamps on the back to hold it still on some spacers we made, and then we just screwed the front in. And now all this back half, or the bed portion of the frame, is nice and secure. And what did I do next? So I had to trace out the frame rail. Sorry, I don't remember what I did. But I'll show pictures and kind of describe what's going on. In fact, let me just bring this over here. So I had to trace out the frame rail. I wanted to make sure and know where my notch was going to be sitting on the frame rail, and then the overall height of the frame rail. So I just kind of laid that out, and then built in the angles. And it just kind of just making it up. There was no geometry necessarily involved, just kind of what looked right, and along with the thickness, and the thickness of the frame rails I just used, or of the notches I should say, I used the thickness of the frame rails, which kind of made sense to me. Keep it that same thickness, and then I cut this one as a template, and I want to say that because I wanted to use this one just as a template, not as one of the actual pieces of the notch that we're making. And I guess I should back up and explain that originally I was just going to cut a piece of frame rail and kind of butt joint that in. I decided not to do that. We're going to build this more like you would probably a real notch, is where you build an outside and inside wall and then box that in and then cut out your frame rail. Follow along, and I think it'll make sense. And I hope this is maybe the right way to do it. I don't know. As we know, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doing the best I can here. So this is the way I'm doing it. I definitely don't want you to think this is a step-by-step guide. But anyways, I did cut out the first notch. I would just call it the notch piece as a template, because what happens is when you trace that template, it thickens, right? You have the width of my pencil lead, and it gets a little thicker. So I actually traced out 4 new ones so that I knew they'd all be the same size. That way, when I cut them out, they're all the same size, and I don't have one that's undersized, which is the template. Now, it did make the thickness of the notch rails a little thicker, but I think that's fine. It's not a huge deal. And then the last thing is we had a cross member back here behind the axle, and that's right where the notches need to go in. So I had to remove that. So I simply just clipped it and then sanded the frame rails. And in fact, I sanded the inside and the outside frame rails. We'll come back to live here. I sanded both inside and outside frame rails nice and smooth, just using a sanding stick, or what is more commonly known as a fingernail file in my household. But yeah, it's just a sanding stick, and use that to sand it nice and smooth. Now, the next part I need to do, which we'll look at our what I'm calling the frame stand, which is very used term of that, loosely used way of using that term. There we go. I think that's a complete sentence. I don't know. Anyways, but I'm loosely using the term frame stand to describe what I've got going on here with a piece of MDF. But what I want to do is make sure and got some perpendicular lines. So when I say perpendicular, I mean perpendicular to the frame. So we want to be square. We want everything to stay square. That's the whole point in this, is to keep things square. So I used a common, because I could only fit so much of my what you call it, my, what is this thing called? My ruler. I can only fit so much of my ruler in here. So I use this common location on both frame rails, this notch here, to kind of give me a line. And then I started just measuring off. I wanted to find, in fact, let me just show you this line here. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me turn this light off. It might not be so, well, it is just as glary. I'll point. This line right here is actually pretty darn close, and not when I say pretty close, it's like pretty dead on to where the axle sits now. So right here in this notch, let me see if I can show you right here in this notch. So I wanted to get that line because then off that I was able to draw in this line, which is going to be the inside of the front rail of our notch. Oh, and let me mention too, the other reason I'm doing why these notches are like this, and I didn't mention it, I should have while I was showing the pictures, as you can see this, so this is parallel to this, the frame rail is parallel to this, so I can just set these notches, can you see this, all the way onto the frame table, right? Like this. Let me just show you up front here. I'm setting it on the frame table, and then that's how we get our height. Does that make sense? So I don't have to try to figure out, oh, let me get them all this. Nope, they all just sit flat on the table. And then what I can do is position this corner. Let me point better. Now this is how I'm doing it. This is what I don't know if this is the best way to do it. But this corner here can now sit right on that line with the notch sitting flat on the table, and I can literally just put all 4 of them in just like so, like that, right? All 4 of them. In fact, let me just mock up 2 of them. I'll just kind of hold them here. And basically what I'm going to do, but I guess I should mention, I'm just going to glue on the frame rail, right? I'm going to CA glue this to the frame rail, and then we're going to have the inside and outside of our notches. Can you guys, I hope you can see what I'm talking about. And then all I have to do is come in and cap this with well, I can use this with more styrene, so we can just come in and cap it like so. I hope that makes sense. And what I will do when I cap it is I'll leave the styrene overhung. And by the way, I'm going to do this in between episodes. I'll take more pictures, so tomorrow you can see the process, better see the process I'm trying to describe right now. But I'll leave overhang on that styrene, and then I can just sand it smooth down with these outside pieces of the notch. Does that make sense? So then we have a full notch. I can go in, and this part that's all below the frame rails down here, if I can show you, all this stuff down below the frame rails, that'll get removed, cut off, boom, boom. Then what I'll do is I'll make sure everything's glued up nice and good, nice and well. Make sure everything's cured up and good and solid. Because then the next mission will be to cut. Let me see if I can hold this and show at the same time. To cut all this out here. So we'll cut it there. Cut all this out. Now, and everything will be held in place because we're still on our frame jig here, our frame stand table, whatever it is, and so everything will continue, hopefully, to be held square, and then of course it'll also be held square because we have this in, and then once this part's cut out, and again I'll show this in more detail tomorrow. Once this part's cut out, we can box in the inside of the notch. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So what I've got to do between now and then, and like I said, I'm gonna continue to take pictures. In the future, I'll take video, but my computer is just so bad right now that I can't add more video footage in because it just locks up the computer. That's why I'm doing this with photos. I hate that. I wish I could show you live action as I do it, but I will take photos. I'm able to do that of me. What I'm about to do next, which is basically to reiterate. Glue in the outsides and insides, all 4 of them. Box them in, sand down the boxing, remove the underside, cut out the frame rail notch, and then we've got to put our brace back in between the 2, which I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I wanted to do it with round bar on the front and the back, run round bar here and here. I don't have that, so I might have to order it, or I do have some big square stock, but this is really big stuff. I thought maybe I could just run it down the middle, the square stock down the middle, and use that as our mounting points for our bags and whatnot. But it just seems awfully chunky compared to the rest of the chassis. So I think what I'll do is I'll order up some round stock, because normally you would run 2 bars in between, and then I might, well, we have a brace back here, but I might even run another one back here, because that might be part of the gas tank support. I don't know, but we'll see. Wherever we need to put in bars for mounting things, that's where we'll do it. But I think I'll order up some round stock. But anyways, let me know what you think so far. This is how far I've gotten. Most of the time here was kind of planning out and strategizing how I wanted to do this. But I think this is going to work really nice. I'll continue working on it. Well, as soon as I turn the camera off here, I'm going to keep going, take the photos. So join me tomorrow if you want to see how it turns out. If it turns out good or bad, it's a toss up. It's a toss up whether this works or not. So it might be interesting to tune in tomorrow and find out. But anyways, let me know what you think. Let me know down in the comments. Do you think it's going to work out? Do you think this is the right way to do this? Is there a better way to do it? I don't know. But let me know down there in the comments. Hit the like button. Hit the hype button. Is there a hype button? Let me know if there's a hype button down there. Subscribe if you want to keep up with these builds. We've got 3 builds going on right now. This is one of them. I'm trying to get this done, but there's 2 other builds also going on that I'm trying to get done. So subscribe if you want to keep up with that. I don't know. Do all those things everybody tells you to do on YouTube. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.